next step in prepping our fabric is to lay our pattern down. So I have the fabric here, and this is a directional fabric, meaning the Bears logo is actually all going this way. So I want to make sure that, you know, if I'm wearing these pants, they aren't upside down. So I am going to position my template, making sure I check my directions to know if I need my template or my pattern face up or flipped to be face down. If you are doing the shorts pattern, I believe you need pattern number 1 face down, and then pattern number 2 is, I believe, face up, but double check to be sure. So I'm just gonna kind of smooth out these wrinkles, but notice here's the top of my pants, it's going this way with the direction of the Bears logo. So I'm gonna kind of smooth out. You can iron the paper with the fabric on top of it, but just be careful because it is paper. But you can iron over this to smooth it out and remove the wrinkles. So just be careful and mindful of not just wadding up the tissue paper. It's easier if you can kind of roll it or fold it neatly. So I'm gonna push this all the way up towards the top because we're not gonna need any extra fabric up here. If we need to lengthen, we would actually use the shortening and lengthening line is right here. But either way, I'm just gonna kind of move my fabric over so I have like extra fabric over here just in case. We're gonna keep all extra fabric, and or you have kind of a bigger amount of fabric to do extra projects with. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to measure from the grain line arrow to the selvage edge that I pinned. So actually I'm gonna move this way, closer to the selvage edge. So make sure your pattern is not hanging off of the fabric. It does need to be all the way on. We wanna kind of stay away from the selvage edge. I'm gonna pull this up so we have minimal waste of the fabric. I'm gonna take my measuring tape and I'm gonna measure from the top of the arrow, smooth this out, to the edge of my fabric. And it looks like it's not exactly even on, like, it's almost 17.5. So I'm actually gonna move my tape measure to 17.5, and then I'm gonna move my pattern over so it's right on the 0. So it's a nice even number. So 17.5. Then I'm gonna take a pin and pin down on the grain line. So straight through the arrow and the pattern and both layers of the fabric. So 17.5 is my measured amount, or the distance from this arrow, grain line arrow, to the selvage edge. Now I'm gonna go in the center of the arrow. If you are doing shorts, you only have to measure the top of the arrow and the bottom of the arrow because your shorts it's a smaller grain line. So I'm gonna place this right on the arrow and then drag this over. And it's not exactly 17.5. It's actually 2/8 shorter. So I'm gonna actually pull my pattern away from the edge. Yep, okay, so then I just need to make sure that that distance is 17.5, which it is. So you're gonna move the tissue paper either away from or towards you to make sure that it matches whatever that first number distance was. So 17.5 is my number. Okay, so I'm gonna measure one more time. I'm gonna smooth out my tissue paper, line up the edge of my tape measure right here, drag this over, and it's actually right where it needs to be. It's right at 17.5, so I don't really need to move it. I don't need to pull on the tissue paper. So again, pushing down, bringing the pin up, just be careful you don't puff yourself. So I've got 3 pins in my tissue paper. So I have measured the distance from this arrow, the top of the arrow, to the edge, and that equals the other 2 measurements. And that's just so that we know that this pattern is lined up straight in relation to the edge of the fabric of the selvage edges. So none of the bear's heads are gonna be crooked. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take pins and I'm going to smooth out. I'm gonna start at the top. I'm gonna smooth out or press down like the rays of a sun, starting from the center pins outward. And I'm going to pin around the outside of my pants, going through the pattern and the 2 layers of the fabric. So I'm gonna pin every like 3 to 4 inches. Again, smoothing out the tissue paper so it's flat because we want to maintain the shape. We don't want all these bumps or wrinkles. And you are just gonna, as best you can, pin going all the way around. If the tissue paper has ripped in some spots, you can either tape it or just be mindful that you kind of flatten out, like there was a rip right here. I just kind of like smoothed that out, and you don't necessarily have to tape it. Now you can reuse these patterns. So if you plan to make multiple pairs of pants, especially in that same size, or even a smaller size, you would have to obviously cut on the lines that you need, but you would probably want to tape your pattern if you were going to reuse it. So there's a couple rips in here. So that would just be when I go to cut this out, which is the next step, you just make sure that you're on the cutting line. Okay. So I'm just going to pin all the way around, again, smoothing out all the wrinkles. Once you have that pinned, then you will carefully take your shears and you will cut out right on the cutting line. So this student actually highlighted the medium, but they cut on this line. So I'm not quite sure, I'm not gonna cut this one, but I'm guessing if this student needs the medium, then they could just go ahead and continue to pin, and then when they go to cut out, they would cut right on that medium line. Most of you should have already cut out nice and neat right on the line. So that is best practice, that your pattern, if you are a size, whatever size you are, you want to make sure that you cut right on that cutting line. That's why it's there. It's called the cutting line because that's the line that you want to cut on the pattern. So if it's like that, then obviously you can pin very close through that cutting line. And then when you go to cut this out, using sharp shears, you can just cut right along the edge. So you're not cutting through the paper, the tissue paper template. You're cutting just the fabric. So right on the fabric, again, so you can keep this template for future use. So once you cut around your fabric, I do want to show the notches. When you guys cut your notches, you want to cut these outward. So please make sure that as you're cutting around the cutting line, that you don't go into the fabric, but you cut outward. So if I was doing a notch right here, I would do something like this as a notch. Just as an example, you wouldn't have a notch right here, but. So as best you can, when you get to those notch steps, that's how you would cut those out. So you have these little triangles that are coming out from the edge of the pattern. So I would do that when I get here, I would cut outwards from my notches. I just wanted to give you the example there. So that is the next step of measuring your selvage edge, pinning around the perimeter, and then cutting out your template. After you do that, you'll remove all of the pins, and then you'll be ready for your first construction step.